Joining the webinar. We will be starting in a few minutes. Thank you.
It's 11 o'clock.
Thank you for joining the webinar. We would be starting in a minute. Hello, welcome to this webinar. We have a very interesting topic today for you guys. It's on the leadership traits to manage Gen Z and the millennials. And very, very proud to bring Pontify Group and Dan Pontify for this session together with Tal Success and Quint. So again, welcome to this webinar. Before we start, a little bit of logistics. This session is getting recorded. So last time we had a lot of questions that can we get the video, the slides. You'll all get the copy of the recording. So don't need to copy, don't need to take the snapshot. So we'll give you a session copy, don't worry. Second is on the right side on your panel, there is a question pane. If you have any question during the session or immediately after that, you can go in and put in your questions. I will collate all the questions before the session ends for Dan, and I will present the top 5 or 7 questions to him. So please feel free to put in all your queries and questions. It is also possible that during the session, if the question is basic and we can answer it locally, we will do that and collate that. Otherwise, we will put it up for Dan for answering. With that, I'd like to again welcome you again for this session. Now, if you look at the topic, it's very, very pertinent topic today. And I was just chatting with some of the HR folks that we work with in terms of what's the issue with working with Gen Z and the millennials. And one of the things, and not just for India, for across the world, the issue is retention, right? It's more than 55% turnover in the entry level plus 1 levels, right? So the entry level folks and plus 1 level, it's almost 50% plus attrition level or turnover level as we call it. And that's a big issue, right? We are spending hordes of time and lots of money to recruit people, right? Develop them, train them, induct them, and as per the data, 50% of the people leave within 120 days of joining, and that's a big drain on the amount of effort that the company puts in. And today we want to look at some of those leadership traits, how that could be effectively managed, managing the Gen Z and the millennials, right? So let's quickly get on with it. I'd like to welcome Pankaj. Pankaj is the Chief Strategy Officer for TAL Success to join the session. Thank you, Pankaj, for joining.
Neil,
Yeah,
thanks a lot. Welcome all of you.
yeah. My name is
There's
Sunil
some
Mehta.
problem with my camera.
On behalf of Quinn, TAL Success, and Dan, I'd also like to welcome you to this session. A quick introduction on our journey before we hand it over to Dan. A little bit on, who is TAL Success, what's TAL Success, what do we do. So TAL Success, as you know, is a brand of Quinn Consulting Services, and this brand is focused only on the people side, the human capital side. As you know, we've been doing a lot of work on best practices. Quint has been there since 1992 globally, in India 2004. We've been doing a lot of work on best practices. We've been doing a lot of work on technology. We've been doing a lot of work on process and technology, right? But one area which is also as critical as process and technology is the people side, right? How do you keep them motivated, right? How do you get them to align with each other? How do they collaborate? How do they communicate with each other, and so on and so forth. Leadership becomes a very, very critical trait. And that's the area that TAL Success is focusing on. And we picked up our 15 years of experience in India, working with organizations like yours, and globally 30 years of experience to bring some of the best names in the industry together, right? Obviously, Pontific Group from Canada is one of those such groups that we brought to India, but along with that, we have other areas as well. Omnia is about assessments, right? This is about behavior, leadership assessments. Talent Smart, again, a US company, is mostly on EQ, yeah, the well-being, the whole concept of emotional intelligence, and that's been an area of concern in the last 5 to 7 years as well. So Talent Smart focuses completely on that. One of the very old organization and very reputed organization. Richardson focused more on business and sales. ROI Institute focuses mostly on the impact of the investment that you put on people, whether it's on training, whether it's on improving on projects, maybe you're doing a transformation project. How does it impact the ROI? So that's about it. And also fears, which is not here, but fears, which is latest, which is talking about mostly on how to build a culture on conversation. And everything that we do today is about communication and conversation. So how do you build that up as well? And as we go, we are talking about from a leadership point of view, how to manage self, that's very critical, how to manage our teams, which is other people in the team, and third, going up, is how to lead organization, how to manage organization. And these are the three critical areas of leadership that we need to develop right from base till the leadership level. And last but not the least, obviously, we're also talking about the entire business spectrum of opportunities and managing the entire sales portfolio. This is what typically quickly we do in Quinn, and this is most of the issues which organization are facing. First is how to best organize the IT. So that's where we bring the IT best practices, whether it is ITIL or whether it's COVID or it's TOGAF or it's any of those, or Agile or Lean, etc. How do you make it work so that we are able to structure it in the best possible way, where it's the most efficient and effective way? Blending technology with business, another big area that organization doing. We always used to talk about LETA, or business IT alignment, as you say, the beta part. How does the business alignment IT? And business always wants changes, right? And IT is also looking at changes, but also looking at stabilizing IT. And it's almost continuous tussle between business and IT. So how does that work together is an area. Innovation, again, we do a lot of work on design thinking, on lean and agile and data science, the whole innovation spectrum across the thing. Transforming to high performance, again, today we will talk a little bit on the leadership level on high performance, but how do you transform performance of individuals and performance of teams and performance of organizations? So to convert an organization into a high performance organization. Being smart with data, I think we can't live without data. We can't live without data analytics. I think this is here to stay. And what's the best way to do it? What is the best procedures? What are the best technologies? What are the best tools to really able to manage? And last but not the least is the entire digital transformation or the digital structuring that we need to do. And if you go to a website of any organization which is worth its name, They're talking about digital transformation, getting closer to the customer, giving them a better experience, giving them an easy experience, right? And we know about Airbnb, and we know about Google, we know about all the stories about how they help in the entire digital landscaping of the organization. Moving on a little bit closer to the journey, and we said we started globally in 1992. Tal Success we launched in 2021. Oh, yeah, but we also had a division called Twin Colors in 2013. Yeah, that was our introduction of bringing in the human capital value. But we recherished it, rebranded it, entire spectrum changed in 2021. This is what we are normally famous for. As I said, since 92, we've been doing a lot of work on the best practice areas, on the technology area, on the data science area, on the DevOps and Agile and technology area. But with Tal Success, it's more the people side of it that we want to focus on. Okay, so that bring us to a very interesting um, point now, which is where I introduce Dan. Dan is the founder and CEO of Pontifract Group Canada, one of the very, very charismatic leader and a very good friend. Right, we've been working with Dan for the last 2 years in with Dal Success. We're very proud and honored that he could spare time again for us. He's coming in to speak the second time. He's an author for 4 books. The fifth book is on the run now as we speak. And these are all bestsellers. If you go to Google, you can find all of them. It's also on Audible. So Lead Care Win is one of the top selling books. And one of the things that we have also decided is to make it more interesting, make it more interactive with all the audience. All the people who participate, whether in questions or participate in any other way, we want to give 5 Lead Care Win books to them, right? So today you will get Dan's Lead Care Win book, personal copies for the top 5 people who participated and answered some of our queries and questions, and and put some questions in the question panel as well. So this is a great opportunity to get hands on one of those bestsellers that Dan has. And with that, I'd like to welcome Dan. Thank you, Dan, for your time. I know it's a little late in Canada, but thank you for being here. Thank you for being with Tal Success and Quinn in our journey on leadership. Over to you, Dan.
Hey, Sunil, thanks so much. Team PK, everyone over there at Tal Success, you guys are amazing. And Quinn, it's wonderful to be here. I know it's a little late. It's yesterday for me, which means it's tomorrow for you, or today, I guess. But it's great to be here. Canada says hello wherever you are joining in from today. Essentially, I want to talk about this, like how we manage, how we lead millennials and Gen Z. And I think I've picked out some pieces from all of my stuff, whether it's the books or my writing, Forbes, HBR, other stuff. And I'm gonna talk specifically about 5 considerations today. So we're gonna talk about purpose, and then something called staying present, which is what you need to be doing as a leader for millennials and Gen Zs. How you can remain curious and how you can help that ethos with your team members. How to embrace change and how to bring that about, because there's all kinds of change happening with the mindsets of Gen Z and millennials. And then the last one will be called kind of a mashup of being relatable and a champion of the team member ultimately. If you can do that on all 5, and we'll have some time for question, I imagine, then I think we're in good stead. And we should be done right by the end of the hour. So let's get on with it. Purpose. Here's what I'm noticing, first of all. I'll give you a story, first of all, with someone who is a Gen Z. And the woman in the picture right here, her name is Leylah Fernandez, and she's a very famous Canadian tennis player. So why not start with a Canadian story? So my question here, are you playing for meaning? Well, Leylah, last September at the US Open in New York City, we were very proud of Leylah because she went all the way to the final in the women's side of the draw, and she lost, but we were very proud. And in tennis, they do weird things where after you lose, if someone hands you a microphone and you have to talk about, you just lost a match, and it's kind of weird. Well, here's what happened. Leyla Fernandez did say, tough loss, thank you to my opponent, gracious loser. And then the person who was interviewing her kind of walked away with the microphone, but then Layla stopped and said, hey, wait a second, can I have the microphone back? And here's what she said. She said specifically, she said, I know on this day it was especially hard for New York and everyone around the United States. I hope I can be as strong and resilient as New York has been in the last 20 years. Now, why do I bring this up? Well, because first of all, the championship for the women's side of the US Open tennis final was played on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Imagine that. So imagine this Gen Zer, who's not even still a teenager, whom had it within her after losing probably the biggest tennis game of her life. She asked for the microphone back and said something about other people. And I think that's what we're in for. And that is, we need to be thinking about purpose and where we're at from what I call a purpose-driven leadership perspective. It is really important to play for meaning and to invoke that with the team members that you have. One of the things I've noticed, however, is that we confuse purpose with passion. And so we need to, understand it and not negate the fact that there are these two concepts. But purpose is not passion. And that's not that say that passion is not important. Passion is still important. But passion is basically happiness. And what we find is that you can't just offer happiness or passion in a job. Yes, you should have happiness in the job, but that can't be it. There has to be more. And that more that we're talking about is purpose. Purpose is about values. It's being about value-based. And so if you're a leader and you're thinking about the team members, what is it that you can do to help them stand for something in their role? And so what we need to be doing a lot better is something called personal purpose. What do you mean by that? What's personal purpose? Well, as a leader, I believe it's really important to be helping your team members define their personal purpose. Why? Well, if we're asking our team members, employees, to come into work with, quote, their best self, what I'm finding is that in younger generations, their best self needs a little bit of work, and that's where we can come in to help them with that. And it's their expectation that you're actually going to help them do something about it. So the questions that, I find that are being asked are things like, well, why are we here? Sounds existential, but it's actually important. Why are we here? Like, what's kind of the purpose of our business? So who do we serve? So if you're not helping the team member with their kind of why are we here statement, if you're not helping them with the, well, who do we serve through this, Dan? And you're saying, well, there is a difference you can make. And so having a conversation with these team members about, okay, why are you here in your role? Who do we serve? Is it just for profit? Is it all stakeholders? Is it the community? Is it the environment? Is it for equality? What difference can we make in our roles, but also to the greater society? I think that's so key. When you can have that conversation with your team member and say, you know what? You can make a difference, and let's help you figure that out. And so what we're getting at is team members that you're leading really want to answer these questions. Like, well, what's my legacy going to be every day? How am I going to be known when I leave a room? Or how do I want to be known when I enter a room? Or how do I want to be known, generally speaking? So if you're a leader and you're uncomfortable having these questions or conversations with the team member, you're going to be in trouble. Because like Leyla Fernandez, the 19-year-old whom at the US Open when she lost, wasn't really worried about losing. Yeah, it was disappointing. She was worried about it being the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So what are you going to do to talk about these questions with your team member? Another way to look at it is sort of this, and that is, Your personal purpose, anybody's personal purpose, breaks down into kind of three questions, right? So what are we doing, or what are you doing to help develop that personal purpose of the team member? So it's the what question about develop. But then there's a who question, and that's about definition. Who is going to define me? How will I be defined, if you will, right? Who is going to know whom I am in every one of my situations? And that's about that definition of purpose again. And then the third one on the far right, how? Well, that's that decision point about how do I want to be known? And so these questions go over and over and over again in the conversation with a millennial, with a Gen Z. And that's where you have to be having conversations that aren't just about business. They're about life. They're about, well, what do you want to become? They're about, well, who do you want to be? They're about, how do you want to be known? And more than ever, I see these questions pop up in good leaders, in great leaders, but not enough, because we're too scared to have the conversation. We're too scared to actually open up and know that our role here as leaders is not just to do business results, but it's actually to build better human beings. And that's an expectation of millennials and Gen Zs. So some things to consider, some kind of personal purpose thoughts, right? We can't never stop developing or never stop learning. So what are we doing to have those conversations with our team member? That's part of their purpose. Remember, it's the develop point. What are you doing to help evolve your views on what is purpose? What are you doing to help evolve their views on where they are right now in this stage or age of their career? Should their expectations be to be promoted after 4 months in the role to director? No, first of all. But that's part of having these conversations about purpose. What is true purpose? Are you connecting the dots for them about their life, personal goals and values with what's going on at work? There shouldn't be two employees or two mindsets, I guess, right? There's one. There's Sunil, there's PK, there's Neha, there's whomever. And they come into work, but they're still a human being. So as a leader, are you having those conversations and helping them with things like personal goals and their values, what they live by? This is the expectation of millennials and Gen Z. They want to know how they should be showing up in all instances, and they want a boss, you, I think, to have that conversation with them. They don't need to be your buddy. They need to know that you care. And they need to know that you're going to be there to back them up and to support and to be there in this entire conversation about purpose. Here's something you can do. Maybe you can have a conversation about them with what I call the declaration of personal purpose. It's like a statement. So this definition of how people will show up each and every day, this kind of personal, very pithy and real 1 or 2 line statement. Maybe you could help them write it. Maybe you could at least bring up the conversation with them about it. Some examples. The founder of 1-800 Got Junk, global enterprise worth billions of dollars. Brian Scudamore is the founder and CEO. And his purpose statement is make meaning, not money. I think that's pretty good. Oprah Winfrey, you might have heard of Oprah. To be a teacher, to be known for inspiring my students to be more than they thought they could be. Jill Schnarr is a friend of mine when I used to work at TELUS as a chief executive or a chief envisioner executive there. Be easy to. Be easy to do business with, to have coffee with, to do lunch with, to have a meeting with, to collaborate with. Be easy to. I think that's wonderful. And then mine is as follows. We're not here to see through each other. We're here to see each other through. So I urge you to declare not only your personal purpose and to show your team members what it's like, but to help them craft their 1 or 2 line statement. If you can do that, you're starting to open up the first bridge to what I believe leadership really is about these days for millennials and Gen Z, and that is you better be there to build relationships. So purpose is number one. Number two is something I call staying present. And because of technology, as you'll see in this little story, I think it's becoming apparent that we need to be more mindful of when we're present in front of our team members. So this is a photograph of I took when one of my three children were playing soccer about 2 years ago, just before the pandemic hit, actually. And it was raining that day, and I noticed that one of the mothers or aunts of one of the opposing soccer players had come to the match, and she put out this, it's a tent. It's like a tent for one. And it had a little window, and so I guess she could keep dry, which is wonderful. But the problem is, you can see from the arrow, she spent the whole entirety of the match on her device, on her mobile phone. And so I got really angry because she was missing out on this, 13-year-old playing soccer, and I felt bad for the 13-year-old. But then I remembered, oh, wait a second, that's happening everywhere in our organizations. We're too busy. We're not present for our people. And I think that's indicative of what's happening, i.e., there's a lot of frustration and disengagement because as leaders, we're not there for our team member. And we keep overloading them with all kinds of tasks, and we wonder why they're wanting to move on to the next role. Well, if you're not there for them and their loads are overburdened, and we're doing things like building texting lanes outside of Shanghai, and we're putting red, amber, green lights in sidewalks in the Netherlands so people don't walk into traffic, I think this is what we feel like. We feel like we're actually two hamsters in a hamster wheel, and it becomes very, very, well, not great. So what can you do? Well, I'll boil it down to kind of 4 tips. So for a leader to be present with team members, I think you need a reality check, first of all. You need a reality check on, well, what matters most? How are you going to be there for them? And will you be distracted when you're in a one-on-one meeting? Will you be there for them, understanding what it is that is the reality check of our lives, that we're busy, and it's crazy busy. So are you going to, number 2, do a time audit? Which basically means, are you there to maybe actually audit how much time they're spending in meetings, in busy work, maybe even in commuting if we ever go back to that, and so on. So you prepared as a leader to audit, what it is that they're doing in terms of their time, and showing that care and not treating them like a number, not treating them like, an inhumane being. Will you recommend that, number 3, that in their calendar, you and them should have focus blocks so that there is no meetings, that there is time to actually just focus on the work? Maybe a focus block could be a development meeting with you when you're just talking about their development. So focus blocks are different than just the times we're having when we're spending in meetings and doing work. Focus blocks are times where we do not do things that may be related to the busyness, but that we're focused on other things, or we're just at least not being distracted, or our time is not being invaded. Because again, I find that millennials and Gen Zs in particular, they want their freedom, if you will, like space. They need white space, so you provide it. And then number 4, I find that there's definitely a need to have over communication. And so to stay present, you need to work with your team as a team to establish what I call team norms. And team norms are kind of like policies or procedures, or call them habits. And you work on them as a team to come up with them. So how long should our meetings be? How many one-on-one meetings do we need? What is my development norms for the year or for the month? And all the ways we're going to communicate. Do we communicate on text? Is it on WhatsApp? Is it other DMs? And so if you're not working with them to create what the team norms ought to be, and you just tell them it's going to be like this, they're going to check out. they're going to say, no, thank you. You're not listening to me. Why would I want to be here? And so all of these tips, like all of these that you see, the reality check, the audits of time, the focus blocks, the team norms, really important for you as a leader to understand what it means to stay present. And you're doing that to stay present for the team members who are looking at you thinking, why are you so busy? And why aren't you paying attention to me? So number 3, I'll call remain curious. And so it's kind of like a principle, and that is, well, let's just tell the story. Malala Yousafzai. Like, is there another better example of someone being curious? I'm not sure. But what did she do? Well, Malala, who is a millennial, of course, right? She was pushing for girls in Pakistan to learn, to be able to go to school and so on, until she finally was almost tried to be murdered. Well, I guess she was tried to be murdered, and she survived. And as we know, she went on to win the Nobel Prize for Peace, as well as, a couple degrees over there in England. But it was that kind of curiosity factor that I was very curious about. She's curious about other girls learning. So she was always curious, and she remains curious to this day, learning about all kinds of things and so on. So where is your curiosity quotient? So if millennials and Gen Zs are always curious, where's yours? And what are you doing to remain curious? What are you doing ultimately to help you see that there are other ways of doing things? So Nelson Mandela brings us to another kind of story just to touch on. And when Mandela was incarcerated in South Africa at Robben Island, Mandela immediately, kind of within the first month, I'll say, he started a university inside of the prison. And the university was kind of known as Struggle University. And you're like, wait a second, Mandela started a university? Like, well, yeah, hear me out here. So what he realized was that there were other inmates in the prison who knew things, who were pretty smart, and that they could do stuff with other people to teach them whatever their practice was, their trade, whatever they had as an expert on, they could teach other people. And Mandela even thought that the prison guards knew stuff too, and that they could also be trainers or instructors or profs, if you will. And so this whole idea that Mandela had was that he was looking around into the prison and thinking, there's other smart people here too. And so with that kind of as a metaphor, I want to give you kind of 5 tips to think about to ultimately remain curious as an individual, but also as a leader, but also as a leader of others. And when millennials and Gen Zs are wondering why you're not curious, or how it is that we don't have kind of a curiosity quotient, in the team, well, don't be surprised. So how will you create kind of your Nelson Mandela Struggle University on your team is kind of the question. So here are the tips for you and remain curious. So the first one is lead off. Like, what are you doing to lead off, a meeting, a new quarter, a new client opportunity, a new project, whatever the case may be? What are you doing to lead off with someone bringing information or knowledge or data sharing or knowledge sharing, to the mission? So what you should be doing is basically leading off with saying, hey, other people know stuff. So let's lead off with learning. Let's lead off with learning from each other is what I'm getting at. Number 2, I call engage. What are you doing to help the team members engage with other people in the organization? How are you building bridges? How are you helping them engage with other contacts and building networks? How are you engaging them to engage with people to build up friends inside the organization? That is remaining curious. When we engage with others, we're curious about where they're coming from, what business unit they might be in, where their background is, where their customers are, what their knowledge might be. And when you engage with others, it's ultimately all about curiosity. So how are you invoking curiosity? By helping them engage with others. What are you doing to engage with others? Because if they look at you and see, oh, That's Sunil. He doesn't work with anybody. He doesn't go outside of his office ever, which is not true because Sunil is amazing. That's the type of kind of query that the individuals will be looking at from you. Now, number 3, adapt. What does adapt mean? Well, as you see, because my 4th tip is called embrace change, adapt is basically to keep an open mindset to say, well, we could probably do this different. So what are you doing to adapt new ways in what millennials and Gen Zs are thinking in their heads about what work is, about what the job is? Because if you're a Gen X like me or a baby boomer or a kind of a late millennial, and you're not thinking about the fact that their mindsets are totally different, you're not adapting. And thus you're not remaining curious. You have to be. Like, spoiler alert. Number 4, I call reinforce. So when the team learns something or you learn something, what are you doing to reinforce that inside of the rest of the team? So if someone has done a really good job or someone has learned something, do you highlight them, bring them into the meeting or the group session or whatever and say, hey, can we learn from you? Can we reinforce that learning for the rest of us so it becomes a habit, maybe a team norm? And then nurture. Okay, so what I mean by nurture is, what are you doing to nurture the curiosity mindset in the team member? So are you having conversations about their learning, their development, their curiosity itself? What are you doing to nurture them so that they know that you care about their own learning or their own curiosity? You have to be much more open than you've ever been before in having these, seems like sentimental, but they're actually now the new professional conversations. You gotta be nurturing. Okay? All right. Now I mentioned embrace change. That's tip number 4. And so in tip number 4, the thing you got to be thinking about is, right, we are always transforming. Like transformation is happening. It's business. Like, come on. Like, I wasn't born yesterday. That I know that in 3 months time things will be different, and in 12 months time things will be different, because we're always inventing and trying to find new ways in which to find customers, build product, improve service, customer satisfaction, service, whatever, right? So let's just get over it. We have to embrace change. We are being looked up to as leaders. And so if we embrace change, that's good, right? But there's a problem, because not every millennial or Gen Z are born the same. For example, there are some who believe change is like an F1 pit stop, and it's like, okay, I'm ready for it, let's go. And it just, the tires get changed very quickly and off they go. And they're like, yeah, let's do it again. So there's a lot of people are millennials and Gen, like, come on, let's change all the time. And maybe you're more like this, where change is kind of like a race between a sloth and a snail, which is really slow, as you can tell. I don't even know how long this video takes. It could be like hours. I have no idea who wins. Let's put it that way. But the point is, you could be in a different mindset of change than what your Gen Z and millennials are. Or maybe you or people that you know that you work with, other leaders, are like this, where they just kind of refuse to change. And that's not cool, right? We need to be able to change. Let me give you a story about change and mindsets. So you've heard potentially of KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. So in England, just before the pandemic, all of the KFC restaurants across the United Kingdom had to shut down for about a week because they ran out of chicken. Supply chain issues, they were trying to change, it was like they tried, but then it was a big failure, right? And so wasn't great. And so 2 things are happening here. First of all, how do you handle when things go wrong in the change? Which is why I need you to listen carefully about millennials and Gen Zs. And then it's a case of, well, could we maybe, handle it differently in terms of what we're going to do to tell people that, we screwed up. So imagine you got like 7 or 8 days, no chicken. Your restaurant's called KFC. I mean, the C stands for chicken. And there's like 120 or so restaurants across the UK that had to shut down. So this is what they did to embrace change. And this is what I'm asking you to consider as you think about when things break down or people don't embrace change too quickly. Now you see this? This is an advert that went out right across the UK, and they rearranged the letters of KFC to be an English swear word, if you can see, FCK. And the ad said, "We're sorry. You know, a chicken restaurant without chicken, well, it's not ideal." So even in the moment of change, when things go wrong, what you need to be doing is thinking through, well, how might I handle the change, and what am I going to do with my attitude for people who are expecting me to freak out? Well, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't. So my embrace change tips as leaders. So what are you going to do to pluck from yesterday's mishaps or yesterday's goodness to help the team see that change is inevitable, but we're going to learn from some of the past mistakes and our past successes to teach us going forward? I mean, history is the best teacher. So why don't we look back as a leader and teach millennials and Gen Zs about what worked and what didn't? Where's your personal stories? What are you doing to listen, number two, to the ideas of the team in order to help change happen? Maybe it's an idea to change something altogether. Maybe you're in the middle of the change and you now need to start listening to your team members to prevent maybe all the restaurants from not having any chicken. So when we have our ear open to the team, when we're listening to the ideas, it's very, very critical that you do so, because the expectation is that Gen Z and millennials have a voice. And during change is one of the best times in which ultimately to listen to that voice. How will you participate, number three, in their world? What does that mean? Well, if you're late millennial or Gen X or baby boomer, and you're not quite sure, for example, what TikTok is, or how they love to group chat, or why they like to send audio texts, well, start learning about that. Start learning where they're hanging out online, how they collaborate, why they collaborate, how they collaborate. Because some of that, a lot of it is gold. But if you're not participating, if you're not asking, if you're not understanding how it is that they gather or communicate or work or love or hug or help each other, well, then you're blind. And when you're blind, how are you ever going to possibly break through to them? And then how are you going to actually improve your results? So I urge you to kind of participate in their world so that you have a way better understanding of where they're coming from. And that's you embracing change to understand their world. And then number four, kind of reframe your thinking. So when you reframe, you're kind of, when you're going through some sort of change, you're helping see the context of where we're going, why we're going, and how long, or what the budget is, how long it takes, et cetera, et cetera. Even reframing in the middle of change to help them see the bigger picture is really important in terms of clarity. Let me give you, I guess, another fast food example here. So Burger King in the UK was like, you know what? It's the middle of the pandemic. I think we should take out full page ads online, newspapers, and tell everyone to order from McDonald's. And you're like, wait a second. So Burger King's marketing team suggested that they should use their marketing dollars and tell people to order from McDonald's. And I'm here to tell you yes. So why am I telling this story? Well, because like with point number one about purpose, here's Burger King saying, hey, we need to care about frontline team members, the essential workers, those people who are working the minimum wage jobs, who need those jobs. And we're just saying, hey, can you spend some money at fast food restaurants, Burger King, Subway, KFC, wherever? And I thought to myself, that's exactly the point. When we can reframe our thinking in the middle of a change like a pandemic to embrace even further change, and it's kind of a purpose-driven one, this is like mashing two of our suggestions up into one. So embrace change, and ultimately, if you think about it from these tips, we want to pluck from yesterday, we want to listen to their ideas, we want to participate in their world, and of course, we want to reframe their thinking, or your thinking. Okay, the fifth one, and then we'll have time for some questions here. So it's kind of a mashup, and I call it being relatable and to champion others. And so let me give you a story here, first of all, about Microsoft. So this kind of like robot that you see here in the picture, well, the robot's name, it's a chatbot actually. It's a chatbot that was released to Twitter, and the name was Tay. So Tay, artificial intelligence chatbot, the team near Seattle and Microsoft were working on this for like 7 months, 8 months, and then they released it to Twitter, and within 24 hours, it had to be shut down. Microsoft just said, oh my God, what's happening? Now, here's what happened to Tay. Tay was, listening in on conversations and Twitter. So Tay became a misogynist, like, a woman hater, basically, denied the Holocaust, became a Nazi supporter, was swearing all over the place. It was just a PR nightmare, right? So how do you be relatable and champion others? Well, someone from Microsoft immediately sent an email to the team and said, keep pushing and know that I am with you. The key is to keep learning and improving. And then that same leader went on CNN and said, it's so critical for leaders not to freak people out, but to give them air cover to solve the real problems. If people are doing things out of fear, it's hard or impossible to actually drive any innovation. So who was the leader that sent the email and then went on CNN? It was the company's CEO, Satya Nadella. Imagine that. Here's a CEO who came in and said, we need to stop being a bunch of know-it-alls and become a company of learn-it-alls. And what he did there later on, he also said, ideas excite me, but empathy grounds me and centers me. So this idea of, relatability, relating to others, championing others, I think Nadella does a pretty good job here in this story of actualizing what I'm getting at. Let me give you a story in England again, and the not so great Manchester United these days. They're my football club, but they stink right now. It's awful. But one guy on that team, when the pandemic hit, his name is Marcus Rashford. He was thinking about others, being relatable, and then championing them because he thought back to when he was a kid. He grew up in Manchester, single mother. He had a sibling, and he was very poor. And so in England, one of the ways in which to get fed is to go to school because they have breakfast and they have lunch programs. So it's free lunch and free breakfast. So the pandemic hits and Marcus Rashford, he's a striker, he's a millionaire. He's thinking to himself, what can I do to help? Because I know all these children aren't eating now. And so he goes after the government to kind of either open up the schools or to open up, some sort of kiosks or tents. And so he wins. And he's like, the government is like, fine, okay, Marcus Rashford, we'll do that for you, I guess. And it was a wonderful thing because he could have saved lives, I imagine, but he certainly helped thousands upon thousands of kids right across England, eat during, the first 12 months of the pandemic or so. I mean, the Queen gave him the MBE, a member of British Empire, so that's pretty cool too. But the most important thing I think about this story is not just Marcus thinking about others and being relatable and championing them, right? But you can instill leaders themselves who look up to you. So you're going to hopefully think about Gen Z and millennials, because if you start doing this, you know what? Maybe they start being leaders. Like this letter that a 7-year-old wrote to Marcus Rashford said, "Hey, you make me want to become a better person because of you. We're going to donate more clothes to charity, more food to the food banks." I think it's wonderful. And the 7-year-old kid then says, "Hey, can you please come join Tottenham Hotspurs, which is a rival football club?" So I don't like the kid, to be honest, right now. He's bugging me. I'm kidding. But there's my point. It's like we need to kind of be relatable and to champion others. And how to do that? Well, can you be real? Just because you have director or manager or team lead or vice president in your title doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. I mean, good for you, but be a human being, be real. That's what we're looking for. When you care, number two, about the lives of your people. So knowing like what schools they went to, do they have a family? Is their mom okay? What music are they into? That's gold. You're being relatable and you're championing them. So when you ask personal questions, number three, about things that are going on in their lives, it matters. It's helpful. When you're inclusive, number four, so you're thinking about them and asking for their opinion, making sure you don't have favorites, that you're not just picking men, you're picking women, that you're, multicultural and opening up to all possibilities around the team. It's important. And the number five, the idea about civility, how you kind of hold the door for people. What are you doing to be civil and kind? Just like Marcus Rashford, just like Satya Nadella. These are really important pieces that are needed, in the lives of these Gen Zs and millennials. So I'm going to tell one final story, and then we'll have time for some questions, I hope. And so this story takes me to New Orleans, actually, in the US. And when I was thinking about writing my fourth book, Lead, Care, Win, I asked my lovely better half, Denise, I said, "Hey, I've never been to New Orleans. I think I might be inspired to help write this book. Can I go there for a few nights?" So I flew to New Orleans by myself, no gig, no customer, no speaking, nothing, just went there. And one of the nights I passed by this place called the House of Blues. And I'm like, "Oh, it's time for a cocktail. I'll go in here." And I saw these two guys playing in a band. And this is me taking the film, by the way. And the gentleman on the left, he says, "This one's for my wife." And they play Stand By Me, the famous song. It was lovely. They go off, they pack up, they leave. The guy at the hat, 10 minutes later, comes back, taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, I was watching you all night. Thanks for coming to our show." And I was like, "Great." And he said, "You know what? Tonight was the first time that we played in 6 months since my wife passed. I thought we were pretty good. Anyway, thanks for coming." And he walked out. And I'll never forget that, because he had the decency to think of me. And this gentleman was probably about 65, 70, and I'm 25, 30 years younger than him. He had the decency, the civility to come back and relate something to me about his wife. And I had never met this guy before in my life. And that's what I'm getting at, folks. When we have purpose and we instill that with our team members, when we're present with them, when we remain curious, when we embrace change and we can be relatable and champion others ultimately and be that champion, I'm telling you, this is the secret sauce of how you can get motivated and engaged Gen Z and millennial employees. I assure you, I bet my life on it because I know it works. So with that, I want to thank you again. And we got a few minutes here. If we can take some time, my friend Sunil will pop back up here and hopefully we'll have a couple questions.
Yes, Dan, not a couple of questions. We've got about 30 questions.
Okay.
So, I'm not sure we can take all of them, but let me. So it's been a great session, right? Because I can see based on the questions which are coming in. So let me pick up based on when they came in. One of the first questions says, the CEO these days, the CEOs these days, with smaller number of team members, are promoting team members every 6 months. So they're promoting them every 6 months, but only on the number of requests worked on. So people approach them and saying, "Oh, I don't like it here," and they get promoted, right? And not on the skill set developed. How do you handle such situations where people would leave if not promoted? So we are again, it's a, as I started the session with 50% turnover, employee turnover. They want to retain people, so they're giving them more money, more promotions. But how do we handle that?
You know, that's a really difficult question. It's a good question, Sunil, but it's multifaceted. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, what's the culture in that team and that organization? Are there favorites, right? What is it that we're doing that's outside of pay? What's the development path? You know, there are going to be people that just want to be promoted as fast as possible because of pay, and I get that. I understand it. What we need to be doing though is asking the question, who do we want on our team? So we should probably have some much better screening processes, first of all, right, on what it is that we want in terms of hiring people, how we build that team. And then there's other things that we want to be considering about, and that sometimes it's, you know what, if that individual is only interested in promotions and way more pay and so forth, maybe that's the wrong person for our team. So maybe it's time to let them go. So it's a balance. I get it, right? I'm not saying that you should not care, but you got to be very careful about who you hire, what your culture is. Some people are going to go and you can't change that. And so it's more important, right, to sort of focus your attention on the things that I mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we are getting into a dangerous situation if we try to promote people because they speak too much, or they are aggressive or assertive, and the people who don't speak too much don't get the promotion. So again, it's a vicious cycle. You're setting the whole thing on a short-term basis, and that's not a good leadership quality. I think the points that we mentioned today, the 5 points, if we all start working on it, from the purpose downwards, I think then they'll have much more activity than just the salary to look forward to, right? I
I
think
agree.
that's okay. Another interesting question. It says, how do you find out what's going on in the minds of Gen Zs and Millennials? So how do we find out what's going on? There's so much going on in their heads. How do we find that out?
Okay, well, first and foremost, you have a dialogue. You talk to them. You take them out for tea, for a walk. Or if you can, you know, over Zoom. You're just like, look, just be honest. You know, you're like, hey, I'm Gen X or whatever your age is, right? And you're like, I just, you know, I'd like to understand a little bit more. So be honest. Number two, I have always had this, by the way, and I call it a reverse mentor. So I have, for every 3 months, I sort of, you know, find someone out there that is 1 or 2 generations younger than me. And that reverse mentor, I have like 3 or 4 sessions with them every quarter about, hey, what's going on in your world? Like, and trying to understand and to decode for me, like what's going on. And then, you know, there are other places where you could go where you don't have to do that. For example, Reddit and TikTok. Some of the Reddit forums, like Gen Z in the workplace, millennials in the workplace, are fascinating. And they're fascinating from a way that says, oh, that's what you're thinking. And of course it's anonymous, but they give you so much data and intelligence on what they're thinking. It's a gold mine. Check out Reddit and TikToks for sure.
Yeah, I think those are valid. So I think communicate with them, converse with them. I think that's the best way. If you want to go, I have one more salesy point. Is that if you really want to go too deep, then there are psychometric assessments available, as we talked earlier. It's also part of your book as well. So if you want to look at their, quotient on each factor, they can do psychometric assessments and figure out what drives them. So not what's going on in their mind, but what drives them, right? Is it only money? Is it wellness? Is it inclusion? You know, are they very agile? They want to do new things. What's it that they're looking at? Are they more structured or unstructured driven? So those things you can figure out and then maybe put them in job profiles which suits their mindsets better. I think that way they will be slightly more happier and probably stay longer. So that could be from one
Love
point
it.
of view.
Great addition, Sunil.
Okay, another thing is there are again it's I think they are trying to solve their issue as you as a coach. So it says in case you realize there's a team member who's having a rock bottom engagement. Again, they are entry level, so they are looking at the bottom and they are not open to conversations. Can we do something for them? What steps should we take if they're not even open to talking?
Well, I mean, one of the things you can do is sort of have like skip levels. So what I mean by that is they might have an ability or the opportunity to chat with people that aren't quote the boss, but that they're skipping kind of the level of you, and they're either talking to a peer, a team member. You set them up with buddies, people that are inside the organization, but they're not directly under you. There's a way to break through some of their hesitation by pairing them up with more like-minded people, or ways in which to get them talking and interacting better. So sometimes hierarchy can get in the way of those open and transparent types of conversations, but there's ways to break it by buddying them up or having ERGs, employee resource groups, and
12.
other kind of facets.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm just trying to combine multiple questions because they're very similar. Um, one of the things, one of the question talks about that one thing that they've noticed about millennials that they are very impatient, right? So there's a constant urge to grow frequently up the corporate ladder. They are in a hurry somehow. They think they're running out of time. So how do we manage this?
Yeah, I mean, part of me is, aren't we all? I mean, I'm not necessarily sure that this is a Gen Z and millennial thing. I think there are lots of individuals who were young coming into the organization back as when I was 24 years old as a Gen X, or when boomers were 24, thinking, all right, I'm a high performer. What am I going to do here? So I'm not fully clear that that's the issue, but I will say it could be more prevalent now because leaders like Gen X and boomers are so busy that they only hear about the people who are crying and wondering why they're not being promoted. So and you don't pay enough attention to the team because you're so busy as a leader. What you only hear is the negative, and you're not there to spend more time on the development, on the positive, on the engagement, and so forth. So I do think that there's, I'm a contrarian by nature, but I do think that's part of the problem, is that leaders are not investing the time to understand more. So there's this myth that Gen Z and millennials are frustrated, impatient, and they just want to move on and climb up. I, I don't know if that's a weakness. I think, to me, that's also actually a sign of encouragement. Like, when you are pushing to grow and pushing to develop and pushing to try new things, isn't that what you want? So, as I say, I'm a bit of a contrarian.
No, I agree with you as long as the parameters are clearly defined for growth, saying, okay, you reach here and you do that and you reach here. And obviously, if they reach that in half the time that others do, yeah, we should not penalize them. They are better than others. They are finishing way before time. They think they're running out of time, but that's fine because they want to grow fast. So I think that's the way they think. But when I was doing my initial leadership trainings maybe 20 years back, these points were taught to us at that time also, saying do work like you're running out of time, right? You have to do it fast, time box it. What you do in 1 hour, try to do it in 40 minutes and 30 minutes. So, that's how you'll be able to do more work. And the more you do, the more you get in the limelights of the bosses and the more you can grow. So I think it's not just the Gen Z thing, it's about the basic leadership and growth. The other fact, unfortunately or fortunately, is the guys who do more work get more work, right? So if you are able to do more, you'll also get more, which the good news is getting compensated now, unlike in a government environment where it's a standard increment in a private organization, it's based on your performance. So I think those are great things. So then we still have, as I said, almost 20 plus questions. I think we won't be able to do it now. I will collate that for you, send it out to you, and respond to these people on a one-on-one basis. Whoever has asked a
Sure.
question, we respond to you so that you don't miss it. But before we go, I also want to inform you what we did initially. We are collating your questions, we are collating your responses. We want to give you the top 5 questions will get you the lead care win book. There's also special schemes running on the leadership workshops. We'll share with that you as well. Before you go, I want to run one last poll for a minute. If Neha, you can run it quickly in terms of a little bit on the leadership levels to interest. I still have more than 42 people online, so if you can quickly spend a minute on your interest to know more about the leadership trainings that we offer through Dan, that would be absolutely. So you just pick up one of the options that you have. Okay, I have about 20% completion. So if you can quickly, in a very agile way, if we want to give it a minute. Okay, that's excellent. Thank you for that. And while this poll is going on, Pankaj, I would like you to do the vote of thanks, please.
Thanks, Dan. Actually, thanks, Sunil. And thanks, audience, for joining this insightful webinar. There were a couple of key takeaways for me as well, Dan. The purpose, as I liked it, and the embrace chain, and the example of the great player on the food bank was very inspiring. Um, Thanks once again for joining this webinar. And we do run a keynote by Dan. And in case those who are interested, please do reach out to our marketing team. And we do have a program based on Dan's book called Lead Care Win for the first line managers. So in case you're looking forward for any of these programs, do reach out to us. And thanks a lot once again for joining this webinar. Bye for now.
Thank you, Dan. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.